Humiliated and rejected at the altar, a royal bride flees her life, only to be found by a forbidden rogue alpha. Their accidental touch ignites an ancient, faded mark, binding their souls. Now, hunted by the prince she spurned, she must trust this wild stranger to survive the war he just started. The scent of 1,000 white roses was so thick it made me want to gag. It was the golden hour. Warm light, the kind painters loved, streamed through the stained glass windows of the Silverwood Pack's grand hall, catching the diamonds in my tiara and scattering tiny rainbows across the marble floor. But all I felt was cold. The silk of my wedding dress, a gown that cost more than a house, was a heavy, suffocating weight on my shoulders. My name is Tessa. I was the first daughter of the Blood Moon Pack. And this was my wedding day. My hands, covered in white lace gloves, were trembling. Not with excitement. With dread. This was not a marriage of love. This was a treaty. A ceasefire given human form. For 100 years, my pack and the Silverwood Pack had been at each other's throats, tearing at the borders of our territories, bleeding our best warriors dry. Today, my union with Julian, the Silverwood Alpha's son, was supposed to end it. I looked down the long aisle. At the end, under a massive arch of white roses and silver ribbons, he stood. Julian Thorne. He was exactly what you'd expect from an Alpha heir. Tall, golden-haired, with a chiseled jaw and eyes so blue they looked like ice. He wasn't smiling. He was staring at me as I walked, his expression unreadable, almost bored. My father, Alpha Robert, held my arm in a grip so tight I knew it would leave bruises. "Hold your head high, girl," he'd hissed at me before we entered. "You are a blood moon. Do not shame us." Shame. That was all I'd ever been to him. I wasn't a strong warrior. I couldn't shift into my wolf form without wincing in pain. My wolf was small, submissive, weak. Not the Luna his pack deserved. But I was the only daughter he had, so I was the one being sold for peace. I kept walking. Each step on the cold marble was a drumbeat toward my doom. The hall was packed with the most powerful alphas in the country. Their eyes were on me, analyzing, judging. The air was thick with power, with the scent of old-world dominance and the sharp tang of werewolves barely containing their animal sides. I reached the altar. My father placed my hand into Julian's. Julian's hand was cold, his grip limp. He didn't look at me. He looked at the Alpha Elder, the one meant to bind us. "We begin," the Elder said, his voice a low rumble. "We gather today under the eye of the moon to join two great lines. To bind the Blood Moon Pack and the Silverwood Pack in blood and magic." He kept talking. I tried to breathe. I focused on the single flicker of a candle to my left. "Just get through this, Tessa. Just survive this. Julian Thorne, heir of Silverwood, do you accept this woman? Do you take Tessa of Blood Moon as your mate, your Luna, to be the mother of your heirs and the strength at your side?" Silence. A heavy, crushing, absolute silence. I turned my head. Julian was looking at me now. A slow, cruel smile was spreading across his perfect face. "Julian," the Elder prompted, his voice laced with confusion. Julian laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp and mocking. It echoed in the cavernous hall. "Accept her," he boomed, his alpha voice rolling over the crowd, making me flinch. He dropped my hand. He literally tossed it away, as if it were covered in filth. "No!" A collective gasp went through the hall. My father took a threatening step forward, his face turning purple with rage. "What is this, boy?" my father snarled. "This," Julian said, his smile widening, "is a farce." He pointed a finger at me. My blood ran colder than the marble beneath my feet. "You would have me bind myself to this?" he spat. "A weak, trembling rabbit? A she-wolf who can barely call her own beast? The Silverwood line deserves strength. My pack deserves a Luna, not a pet." Every word was a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. "Julian, the treaty," one of the visiting alphas shouted. "The treaty is void," Julian declared. "There will be peace, but it will be on our terms. Not by binding me to damaged goods. Damaged, I whispered. The word came out broken. Did you think I didn't know? He sneered. Did you think we wouldn't find out that your own pack tried to force your shift? That your father broke your ribs trying to make you stronger? He shook his head, a look of fake pity on his face. I will not have a broken Luna. He was lying. My father had been harsh, but not that. He was twisting the truth, painting me as pathetic. My father lunged. You insult my blood. Silverwood guards seized him instantly, their claws extended. It was a setup. They had been waiting for this. The wedding is off, Julian said calmly. Then he looked past me into the crowd. But the celebration is not. He motioned to the side aisle. The crowd parted. A woman walked forward. She was beautiful in a fierce, obvious way. Raven hair, red lips, and a deep crimson dress that clung to every curve. Her eyes were locked on Julian, and she was smirking. At me. She stopped beside him, and Julian snaked his arm around her waist, pulling her possessively against his side. This is Alana, he announced. Luna of my true pack. The one I chose. The one who will give me strong heirs. The humiliation was a physical fire, burning me from the inside out. He hadn't just rejected me. He had replaced me. In front of everyone. He had planned this. The roses, the dress, the walk down the aisle. It was all designed to be the highest stage for my deepest humiliation. I looked at my father. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Julian, his eyes promising murder. He didn't care that my heart was being torn out. He only cared about the insult. I was alone. Utterly and completely alone. I couldn't be there. I couldn't breathe the same air. My survival instincts, the only part of my wolf that had ever served me, screamed one word. Run. I turned. I grabbed the heavy silk of my dress and I ran. I heard shouts behind me. Tessa. My father. Let her go. Julian's laughing voice. The little rabbit is running. How fitting. I burst through the great oak doors into the evening air. I ran past the shocked guests on the lawn, past the fountains and the manicured gardens. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran. I ripped the tiara from my hair and threw it into the bushes. I tore at the veil, letting the wind rip it from my head. I ran until my lungs were on fire and my feet, in their delicate silk shoes, were raw and bleeding. I ran until I left the manicured lawns and plunged into the dark, ancient woods that bordered the Silverwood territory. The thorns and branches tore at my dress, ripping the expensive silk to shreds. I tripped over a root, falling hard onto the damp earth. My knee struck a rock, and a sharp, hot pain shot up my leg. I lay there, sobbing, my white dress stained with mud and blood. My life was over. The treaty was broken. My father would never forgive me for this public shame. Julian would hunt me for ruining his day. I had no pack, no home, no future. I was nothing. I pressed my face into the cold dirt, the smell of damp leaves and decay filling my nose. I wished the earth would just open up and swallow me. And then I heard it. A sound that wasn't my own sobbing. A twig snap. Heavy. Close. My head snapped up. My heart stopped. I was deep in the woods, on the edge of territory where rogues were known to hunt. And I was not alone. A shadow detached itself from the trees, stepping into a patch of pale moonlight. It was a man. He was huge, dressed in dark, practical leathers, not wedding finery. He wasn't from the party. He was an outsider. A stranger. His eyes found mine in the darkness. And they glowed. Not blue, not brown. They were a burning, feral gold. He was an alpha. A rogue alpha. And he was staring at me like I was the very thing he'd been hunting for. Please don't forget to give this story a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. Make sure to ring that notification bell. Now, let's get back to the story. Chapter 1. My breath hitched, trapped in my throat. Every instinct I possessed, every lesson I'd ever been taught, screamed at me. Rogue. Rogues were the bogeymen of our world. Wolves without a pack, driven mad by loneliness. They were scavengers, murderers, thieves. To be caught by a rogue was a fate worse than death. And this one was an alpha. I could feel the power rolling off him in suffocating waves, a raw, untamed pressure that my own weak wolf cringed away from. He was nothing like the polished, political alphas I'd grown up with. His dark hair was too long, brushing his shoulders. A rough beard shadowed his jaw. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing worn leather and denim, practical and scarred. He looked like the forest itself, wild, dangerous, and ancient. And he was still staring at me. His golden eyes tracked from my torn, muddy dress to my bleeding hands to my face. He wasn't sneering like Julian. He wasn't angry like my father. His expression was one of intense, piercing curiosity. "You're a long way from home, little bird," he said. His voice was a low gravel, like rocks shifting. It rumbled in his chest, and I felt it in my own. I tried to scramble backward, pushing myself away with my hands. Pain shot up my leg from my injured knee. I hissed, collapsing back. "Don't," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Please. I have nothing. Just let me go. Let you go." He took a step closer. I flinched. "You're on my territory, covered in blood and crying your eyes out in a wedding dress. You're going to have to give me a little more than that." "Your territory?" My blood went cold. This wasn't Silverwood land. I had run that far. I had crossed the border. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I was running. I'll leave. I tried to stand. The moment I put weight on my leg, a white-hot spike of pain made my vision swim, and I cried out, falling again. He was in front of me in a single, silent step. He was so fast. He crouched down, balancing on the balls of his feet like a predator. He was so close I could smell him, the sharp, clean scent of pine, winter air, and something uniquely, warmly wolf. It wasn't the perfumed cologne of the pack alphas. It was real. "You're hurt," he stated. It wasn't a question. He reached out a hand. It was large, calloused, and strong. Not the smooth, cold hand of a prince. "Don't touch me," I snapped, slapping his hand away. The moment my skin hit his, it happened. It wasn't a spark. It was an explosion. A bolt of pure, white-hot energy shot up my arm, straight into my chest. It felt like lightning. I screamed. He roared, snatching his hand back as if he'd been burned. I looked down at my hand, the one I'd used to strike him. There, on the back of my palm, glowing with a soft, silver light, was a mark. It was swirling, ancient, and beautiful, the crescent shape of a new moon. I stared at it, my mind blank with shock. It was impossible. It was a myth. It was the moon's mark. The blessing of the goddess herself. A fated mate bond. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, no, no." I looked up at him. He was staring at his own hand, his face pale beneath his tan. On the back of his palm was the same mark, glowing silver against his skin. He slowly raised his golden eyes to mine. The raw curiosity was gone, replaced by a stunned, dangerous intensity. "Who are you?" he breathed, his voice rough with disbelief. "The moon's mark." It was the holiest of bonds. It was a legend, a fairy tale our grandmothers told us. It hadn't been seen in generations. And it never happened between a pack wolf and a rogue. It was forbidden. It was sacrilege. Horns. Faintly, in the distance, I heard the sound of horns. The Silverwood hunting party. My panic, momentarily forgotten, came rushing back in a tidal wave. "They're coming," I gasped, my eyes wide with terror. "He's coming for me." "Your mate," the rogue Alpha growled. His eyes narrowed. "He's not my mate." I cried, the words tearing from my throat. "He rejected me. At the altar. In front of everyone. He humiliated me, and now he's hunting me. Please, you have to hide me." The rogue's eyes flickered to the glowing mark on my hand, then back to my face. A dark, complex emotion passed over his features. He looked in the direction of the horns, which were getting closer. He could hear them far better than I could. "He won't just be hunting you," the rogue said, his voice flat. "Now he'll be hunting me too." He knew what this meant. A fated mate, a royal bride, stolen on her wedding night. Julian would use this. He would call it an abduction. He would rally his pack, my father's pack. He would call for this rogue's head. And for mine. The stranger stood up, towering over me. He looked at me, this muddy, pathetic, broken thing at his feet. He looked at the mark on his hand. He looked back at the woods, where my nightmare was charging toward us. I saw the decision settle in his shoulders. "Get up," he commanded. "I told you I can't," I sobbed, frustration and fear making me hysterical. "My leg. I can't walk." He didn't sigh. He didn't argue. He just bent down, slid one powerful arm under my back and the other under my knees, and lifted me from the ground. I gasped, my hands flying to his shoulders to steady myself. His body was a wall of muscle, and he held me as if I weighed nothing. "Put me down." "What are you doing?" "Saving your life," he growled, and then he began to run. It was like nothing I had ever experienced. He moved through the dense, dark forest with an unnatural speed and grace. He wasn't running like a man. He was running like a wolf. He leaped over fallen logs, ducked under branches, his feet barely making a sound on the forest floor, all while holding me securely against his chest. I clung to him, my face buried in his leather jacket, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with the run. The horns were growing louder behind us. I could hear shouting now. Men's voices. Julian's voice, raised in fury. "Where are you taking me?" I yelled over the wind rushing past my ears. He didn't slow down. He just tightened his grip, pulling me closer. His body was a furnace against the cold night air. "To the one place they'll never find you," he said, his voice a low rumble against my ear. "I'm taking you home." He burst through a thicket of pine, and we were on a cliff edge. I screamed, thinking he would run right off. Below us, a river raged. "Hold on," he ordered. "Wait, no." He didn't wait. He jumped. We fell into the icy blackness. The shock of the freezing water stole my breath. It was so cold it burned. I was dragged under by the weight of my ruined dress. Panic seized me. I was drowning. Then his arm was around my waist again. He kicked powerfully, breaking us through the surface. I gasped, choking on water and air. "I have you," he roared over the sound of the rapids. "Don't fight me." He was an incredibly strong swimmer, moving with the current, guiding us toward the opposite bank. The horns were gone, masked by the sound of the water. He was right. They would never follow us through this. He dragged us onto the rocky shore. I collapsed onto the pebbles, shaking so hard my teeth ached. My dress was a sodden, frozen weight. I was going to die of hypothermia. The rogue Alpha stood over me, breathing hard, but seemingly unaffected by the cold. He ripped his own heavy leather jacket off and threw it over me. "We have to keep moving," he said. I looked up at him, this stranger who had just saved my life. The silver mark on my hand was still glowing faintly in the gloom. "Who are you?" I whispered, my teeth chattering. He stared at me for a long moment, the water dripping from his dark hair. "My name is Cade," he said. "I'm the Alpha of the Wild Mountain Pack. And like it or not, little bird, it looks like you're my mate." Chapter 2. The cold was a living thing, sinking its teeth into my bones. My ruined dress was freezing to my skin. Cade pulled me to my feet, his jacket a heavy, warm weight on my shoulders. It smelled of him, pine and leather, and that wild, musky scent of wolf. "My pack is just ahead," he said. "You're safe now." Safe. I wasn't sure I knew what that word meant anymore. I had just been saved from my vengeful, jilted fiancé by a rogue Alpha who was now claiming I was his fated mate. Safe was not the word I would have chosen. He saw me shiver, saw my legs buckling. With a low growl of impatience, or perhaps concern, I couldn't tell, he scooped me up again. I was too cold and too exhausted to protest. I buried my face in his chest, clinging to his warmth as he started climbing. The path was steep, almost invisible. It was less a path and more a goat track cut into the side of the mountain. But he moved with certainty, his powerful legs eating up the terrain. After what felt like an hour, he finally slowed. We emerged into a large clearing. My first thought was that it was a fortress. It was nothing like the opulent, sprawling estates of Silverwood or my old home. This was a compound built for survival. A high, reinforced log wall circled the clearing. Inside, a collection of sturdy cabins and a large, central lodge were clustered together, smoke puffing from their chimneys. It was built into the mountainside, defensible, hidden, and rugged. It was beautiful. As we passed through the main gate, a man stepped out of the shadows. He was shorter than Cade, but just as broad, with a wary, scarred face. "Cade," the man said, his eyes flicky immediately to me. His body went rigid. "What in the hell is this?" "Ben," Cade said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "This is Tessa. She's under my protection. Get Lena." "Protection?" Ben's eyes narrowed. "That's a Silverwood wedding dress. You stole a pack bride? Are you insane? You've just brought a war to our doorstep." "She's not a pack bride," Cade growled. "Not anymore." He set me down, but kept an arm around my waist, holding me up. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. With his free hand, Cade raised it, showing the back of his palm. The silver moon's mark, which had faded, flared back to life under his focus. Ben sucked in a sharp breath. His hostile gaze snapped to my hand. I was still clutching Cade's jacket, but he nudged my hand until it was visible. My own mark glowed in response. Ben looked like he'd been punched. "By the moon," he whispered. "It's real." "Get Lena," Cade repeated, his voice softer but no less firm. "She's freezing." "She's hurt." Ben nodded, his shock replaced by a grudging urgency. He disappeared into the largest cabin, the one I assumed was the lodge. "Come," Cade said, and he led me, half-carried me, toward a smaller cabin nearby. The door opened onto a single, warm room. It was simple, sparse, but clean. A fire was already crackling in a stone fireplace. There was a large bed covered in thick furs, a wooden table, and a few chairs. It was clearly his. He deposited me on a chair by the fire, and the heat was so wonderful I nearly cried out in relief. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said, turning his back to me as he rummaged through a chest at the foot of his bed. He tossed a bundle of soft gray fabric onto the bed. "These are clean. They'll be too big, but they're warm." He started to walk to the door. "Where are you going?" The words flew out of my mouth, laced with a panic that surprised me. I didn't want him to leave. He paused, his hand on the latch, and looked at me over his shoulder. His golden eyes were intense. "I'll be outside. To give you privacy. And to make sure no one bothers you." He left, closing the door softly behind him. I stared at the door for a long second before my shivering body reminded me of my task. My fingers were numb, fumbling with the tiny, pearl buttons on the back of my ruined dress. It was hopeless. The dress was a tangled, half-frozen mess. I was sobbing in frustration when the door opened again. An older woman entered, her gray hair in a neat braid. She had kind, sharp eyes and carried a steaming basin of water. "This must be Lena." Ben was behind her, his arms loaded with blankets. "Well," Lena said, her voice practical and kind. "You've had a night, haven't you, child?" She said nothing about the dress, nothing about the mark. She just shooed Ben out, set the basin down, and took a knife from her belt. "Turn around," she ordered. "My dress," I whispered, horrified. "It's a lost cause, dear. Your life is more important." The compound was alive with activity. People, wolves, were moving about, chopping wood, carrying buckets, training in a far-off ring. It was a real pack. Not a political machine, but a community. They were dressed in practical clothes, and as they worked, they talked and laughed. Children were chasing each other near the lodge. This wasn't a den of mad rogues. This was a home. A few people glanced my way. Their stares were curious, but not hostile. News had clearly spread. I was the marked woman, the royal who had been chosen by their alpha. I saw him then. He was standing near the training ring, talking to Ben. He was magnificent in the daylight. He wore no armor, no finery. Just jeans and a dark flannel shirt, but he moved with an easy power, an absolute confidence I had never seen in a man. He was an alpha down to his very bones, but he wasn't a tyrant. He was a leader. As if he felt my eyes on him, his head snapped up. His gaze locked with mine across the compound. The bond flared. It was a sudden, warm pull in my chest, an echo of the heat from last night. It was a jolt of awareness. I didn't just see him, I felt him. I felt his surprise, and underneath that, a possessive, protective warmth that was aimed directly at me. He said something to Ben and started walking toward me. I panicked, stepping back inside the cabin and shutting the door. My heart was hammering. This was too much. It was too fast. A moment later, a polite, firm knock. Tessa. I couldn't speak. Tessa, I know you're in there. You need to eat. Lena said you were exhausted. I took a shaky breath and opened the door. He stood on the step, filling the doorway, blocking the sun. Thank you for the food, I managed, my voice small. Are you all right? His golden eyes searched my face. Your leg. It's sore. But Lena, she's a good healer. She's the best, he agreed. He hesitated, as if he was warring with himself. We need to talk. I know. He nodded, not pushing. Eat first. Then come to the lodge. Ben and we have questions. And I'm sure you do, too. He left. I watched him walk away, his long, confident strides carrying him back to his pack. I closed the door and leaned against it, my legs weak. I forced myself to eat. The food was simple and delicious. It gave me strength. As I ate, I thought about his words. He was right. I had so many questions. After I finished, I braided my hair back, straightened the oversized tunic as best I could, and took a deep breath. I couldn't hide in this cabin forever. I was a blood moon, or I had been. We were not cowards. I limped out of the cabin and across the compound to the main lodge. The stares I got were intense, but I held my head high, just as my father had always taught me. The lodge was one massive, open room. A huge fire roared in a fireplace that took up an entire wall. Tables were scattered around. It was a dining hall, a meeting room, a heart of the pack. Cade and Ben were at a table in the back, maps spread out between them. I walked toward them. Tessa, Cade said, standing as I approached. He gestured to a chair. Sit. I did. Ben just grunted, his arms crossed over his chest. He still looked at me like I was a bomb waiting to explode. First, Cade said, his voice low and serious. I need you to know that you are not a prisoner here. The moon has marked you, but I will not force the bond. You are free to stay, and you are free to leave. I looked at him, stunned. Leave? Leave to where? My father disowned me the second that wedding failed. And Julian, he was hunting me. If I leave, I'm dead. Then you stay, Cade said simply, as if it were the easiest decision in the world. You stay here, with my pack. With me. You will be safe. Why? I whispered. Why would you do this? You don't know me. You're a rogue. I was a royal. We're enemies. You're not enemies, he said, his voice rough. You're a woman who was rejected and hunted. And, he added, tapping the back of his hand, you're my mate. My wolf knows it. The moon has decreed it. That's the only law that matters on this mountain. Cade, Ben cut in, his voice urgent. That law is about to get us all killed. I just got word from our scouts at the border. Julian's war party is still there. They didn't go home. My blood turned to ice. What? Ben finally looked at me, his eyes full of accusation. He's claiming you were abducted. That our Alpha stole a royal bride and forced a forbidden bond. He's using you as an excuse to declare war. He's not just coming for you, princess. He's coming to wipe us out. I stared at him, horrified. This was my fault. I had brought this on them. I should go, I said, standing up, my chair scraping back. If I turn myself in, he'll leave you alone. I can't let you. Sit down, Cade commanded. It wasn't a request. His alpha voice washed over me, and my body obeyed before my mind could, sinking back into the chair. He leaned across the table, his golden eyes burning into mine. Listen to me, he said, his voice quiet but terrifyingly intense. You are not turning yourself over to anyone. You are not a pawn to be traded. You are the fated Luna of this pack. Julian Thorne thinks he can use you as a pretext to attack us? He's been looking for an excuse for years. He hates that we exist. He hates that we are free. He stood up, his power filling the room. You didn't bring this war, Tessa. You just gave it a face. He looked at Ben. Double the patrols. I want scouts on every ridge. We're going to show that spoiled prince what happens when he brings his political games to our mountain. He then looked back at me, his expression softening just a fraction. You are not a weakness, Tessa. You are ours to protect. He turned and strode out of the lodge, shouting orders. Ben gave me one last, hard look before following him. I sat there, frozen. I had been in the compound for less than a day, and I had already brought a war to their doorstep. Cade's words echoed in my head. Ours to protect. He was wrong. I couldn't just be a weak, trembling rabbit waiting to be saved. I wouldn't be. I looked at the maps they had left on the table. They were maps of the borderlands. Of Julian's territory. I knew that territory. I had studied it for months, preparing for my marriage. I knew the patrol routes. I knew the staging grounds. I knew their tactics. Julian had called me damaged goods. He had called me weak. He had no idea what I was capable of. I was not a weakness. I was about to become their secret weapon. Chapter 4. The compound transformed. The easy, communal vibe vanished, replaced by a tense, focused energy. The sound of hammers echoed as men and women reinforced the outer wall. The forge glowed day and night, turning out weapons. This was a pack that knew how to fight. I spent that first day in the lodge, studying the maps, my mind racing. At first, people ignored me, a strange, quiet woman in their Alpha's oversized clothes. But I began to make notes. I drew lines. I marked the patrol routes I had memorized. Ben came in, covered in sweat, to grab a drink. He saw what I was doing. What is that? He asked, his voice suspicious. This is Julian's northern patrol route, I said, my voice clear and steady. I pointed to a ridge on the map. He keeps his best trackers here. But they're arrogant. They bunch up. They think no one is stupid enough to cross the river here because the current is too fast. Ben's eyes widened. He's right. No one is stupid enough. I am, I said, looking up at him. Cade brought me across. Which means you can send a small team back across. You can hit them from behind while they're watching the main pass. Ben stared at the map, then at me. The open hostility in his face was replaced by a look of dawning, grudging respect. Keep talking, he said. For the next 3 days, that's what I did. I didn't just talk, I worked. I sat in on the war council with Cade and his senior pack members. At first, they were skeptical. But I knew Julian. I knew his pack. I knew his arrogance. Julian thinks in straight lines, I explained, standing over the map. He'll expect a defense at the main gate. He won't expect us to attack him first. He sees you as rogues, as scavengers. He won't be expecting a strategy. She's right, Cade said, his golden eyes fixed on me. He's a prince. He's never had to fight for anything. We've been fighting for our lives since we were pups. I wasn't just a damsel anymore. I was their strategist. Lena found me practical clothes, leather pants, and a warm tunic that fit. I helped her in the infirmary, organizing supplies, learning about the healing herbs that grew on the mountain. I was no longer a pet. I had a purpose. The bond between me and Cade was a constant, humming thread beneath my skin. We were too busy to be alone, but I felt him always. It was a glance across the lodge, his hand brushing my back as he passed a low, "Good work, Tessa," that made my stomach flutter. He was watching me, not just as a mate he had to protect, but as a partner. On the fourth night, I was in the lodge alone, going over the plans one last time. The compound was quiet, sleeping before the inevitable attack. I was exhausted, my eyes burning. The lodge door opened, and Cade walked in. He looked tired. "You should be sleeping," he said, his voice a low rumble. "So should you," I countered, not looking up from the map. I heard him walk up behind me. He stopped, standing so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You've done well, Tessa," he said quietly, his voice right by my ear. "You've surprised all of us. Even Ben." "I just know my enemy," I murmured. "He's not your enemy anymore," Cade said. "He's our enemy." His hand came to rest on the table next to mine. I looked at our hands side by side. His, large, calloused, and strong. Mine, slender and pale. The faint, silver outline of the moon's mark was visible on us both. Without thinking, I reached out and traced the crescent moon on his hand with my fingertip. He sucked in a sharp breath. The bond flared, hot and insistent, pulling at my center. "Tessa," he whispered. His voice was strained. I looked up at him. His golden eyes were dark, burning with an emotion I had never seen directed at me. Not pity. Not protection. It was hunger. "I need to ask you something," he said, his voice rough. "Back at the wedding, at the border. I was already in the woods. Before you ran. I was watching." "You were watching the wedding?" "I watched the royal packs," he said, his voice laced with old anger. "I watched their politics to make sure their wars don't spill over onto my land and hurt my people. I was watching the treaty. And then, I saw you, walking down the aisle." He paused, his eyes searching mine. "I felt it then, Tessa. Before the rejection. Before I even knew your name. My wolf, it saw you and it said, 'Mine.'" My heart stopped. "You felt the bond?" Through the crowd. I felt something. A pull. I thought I was going crazy. Then Julian. He did what he did. And you ran. You ran straight to me. As if the moon herself was guiding your feet. She was, I whispered, my eyes wide. I realized it was true. I hadn't just been running from Julian. I had been running to Cade. He raised his hand and gently, so gently, touched my face. His thumb brushed along my cheekbone. "He called you weak," he growled, a low vibration in his chest. "He called you broken. He's a fool. He threw away the greatest gift the moon has ever given." I leaned into his touch, my eyes fluttering shut. I had dreamed of a touch like this. Not the cold, political clasp of Julian's hand, but this. Warm. Real. Possessive. "Cade," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I won't let him hurt you again," he said. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." He leaned in, and I knew he was going to kiss me. I wanted him to. I leaned up, my heart pounding, my lips parting. "Alpha." The lodge door burst open. A young scout, breathless and bleeding from a cut on his face, stumbled in. "They're here," the scout gasped, clinging to the doorframe. "Julian's army. They're at the base of the mountain. They'll be here by morning." The moment was broken. Cade was instantly the Alpha again. The hunger in his eyes was replaced by the cold fire of a warrior. He looked at me, his face hard as stone. "It's time." He strode out of the lodge, and I was left with the ghost of his touch on my skin, my heart hammering for a whole new reason. The war wasn't coming. It was here. Chapter 5. The morning air was sharp and cold, stinging my lungs. The entire pack, over 200 wolves, was gathered in the main compound. They were not an army in shining armor. They were a family of survivors. They held spears, bows, and hunting knives. Their faces were grim, but not afraid. Resolute. Cade stood on the steps of the lodge, with me and Ben beside him. He looked out over his people. "Wolves of the wild mountain," he roared, his alpha voice echoing off the cliffs. For years, the royal packs have called us rogues. They call us scavengers. They call us filth. They live in their warm, rich houses, playing their political games, while we build our homes with our own hands. A growl of agreement rumbled through the crowd. Today, one of their spoiled princes comes to our home. He comes to burn what we have built. He comes to take what is ours. He grabbed my hand and raised it high, our matching moon's marks flashing in the morning sun. He comes for our faded Luna. He comes for my mate. Will we let him? No. The shout was a single, primal roar. He thinks we are weak. Cade yelled. He thinks we are broken. We will show him our strength. We will show him the teeth of the wild mountain. Today, we fight for our freedom. We fight for our homes. We fight for our pack. The pack erupted in a howl that shook the very foundations of the mountain. It was a sound of wild, untamed power. My own small wolf, so long silent, rose up and howled with them. The battle began an hour later. It was not a clash on an open field. It was a war in the woods. Just as I had planned, Cade sent Ben with a small, elite team across the river, far down the mountain. The rest of us waited. I was in the lodge, which had become my command center. I had a full view of the main pass from the high windows. Lena was with me, her medical station set up, her face calm. "They're coming," Lena said, her eyes on the pass. Julian's army was a sea of dark-clad warriors, moving up the pass in an arrogant, tight formation. They carried the Silverwood banner. Julian was at their head, not in a wedding suit, but in black leather armor, his face a mask of rage. "Now," I whispered to the scout beside me. He ran outside and blew a horn. From the cliffs above the pass, Cade's archers let loose. A hail of arrows rained down. The Silverwood warriors, caught completely off guard, broke formation. Then, from the woods on their flanks, Cade's warriors, who had been hidden, attacked. The fight was brutal. It was a clash of claws and steel. Cade's pack fought with a desperate, wild fury that the more civilized Silverwood wolves couldn't match. Then I heard it. A war horn from behind Julian's army. "Ben," I breathed, a smile touching my lips. Ben's team, having crossed the river, slammed into the back of Julian's forces. It was a perfect pincer. Julian's army was trapped, disorganized, and being torn apart. I watched as they began to fall back, their arrogance shattered. They were losing. I let out a shaky laugh of relief. We had done it. The lodge door exploded. It was blasted off its hinges, flying across the room in a spray of splinters. Julian Thorne stood in the doorway, his face covered in blood and dirt, his blue eyes burning with a mad hatred. Two of his personal guard were behind him. Lena shoved me back. "Tessa, run." Julian's eyes locked on me. He ignored Lena completely. "You," he snarled. "You did this." He stalked into the room, his claws long, silver talons extended. "You humiliated me. You and your rogue bastard." "I did nothing, Julian," I said, my voice shaking, but I stood my ground. "You rejected me, remember? I should have killed you at the altar," he spat. He lunged, not at me, but at Lena, swatting her aside. She hit the wall with a sickening crack and slumped to the floor. "No!" I screamed. His guards grabbed me, pinning my arms. "I'm going to take you back to Silverwood, Tessa," Julian sneered, advancing on me. "And I'm going to show you exactly what happens to a broken, treacherous bride. When I'm done with you, your rogue Alpha won't even recognize you." He raised his hand, his claws flashing. "Get your hands off my mate." The voice was a death rattle. Cade stood in the ruined doorway. He was covered in blood, his shoulder bleeding from a deep gash, but his golden eyes were pure, molten rage. Julian's guards dropped me and turned, shifting into their half-wolf forms. Cade didn't hesitate. He was on them in a blur. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. He moved with a speed I'd never seen, a whirlwind of darkness and fury. In seconds, the two guards were on the floor, unmoving. Julian, seeing his men dispatched so easily, actually looked afraid. You filth. Julian stammered, raising his claws. Cade stalked toward him. You came into my home, he growled, his voice dropping to a predatory snarl. You hurt my pack. You touched my Luna. Julian lunged, his claws aimed at Cade's throat. Cade didn't even flinch. He caught Julian's wrist in midair, the sound of bone cracking echoing in the suddenly silent room. Julian screamed. Cade slammed him against the wall, his other hand closing around Julian's throat, lifting him off the floor. You are a prince, Cade snarled, his face inches from Julian's. You know nothing of power. Julian clawed at Cade's hand, his face turning purple, his eyes bulging. Cade, I whispered, scrambling over to Lena. She was breathing. Unconscious, but alive. Cade looked at me, then back at Julian. He was going to kill him. He was going to rip his throat out. Cade, don't, I said, my voice stronger. Don't. Not like this. Don't become him. Cade stared at Julian, his nostrils flaring. For a second, I thought he would do it anyway. The raw animal fury in his eyes was terrifying. Then, with a final roar of disgust, he threw Julian across the room. Julian landed in a heap, broken and sobbing. Cade strode over and grabbed a fistful of Julian's hair, dragging his head up. Yield, Cade commanded. Julian's blue eyes were filled with tears of pain and humiliation. He looked at me, his face a mask of pure, undiluted hatred. This isn't over, he choked out. Cade hit him, a single, devastating blow that snapped Julian's head back and knocked him unconscious. Cade stood over him, breathing heavily. The battle outside had gone quiet. It was over. He turned to me. The fury in his eyes melted away, replaced by a desperate concern. He rushed to my side, kneeling by me and Lena. Is she? She's breathing, I said, my hands shaking as I felt for Lena's pulse. She's alive. He closed his eyes in relief. Then he looked at me, his golden eyes searching every inch of me. Did he hurt you? No, I whispered. I'm okay. He reached out and cupped my face, his calloused, bloody thumb brushing a tear from my cheek. It's over, Tessa, he said. You're safe. I looked at this wild, blood-soaked man, this alpha who had just destroyed an army for me. And I threw my arms around his neck, burying my face in his shoulder, and for the first time since my wedding day, I cried. Not from fear or humiliation, but from relief. I was home. Chapter 6. The aftermath of the battle was quiet. Julian's army had broken, fleeing down the mountain when they saw their prince being dragged, unconscious, from the lodge by Cade. Cade had thrown him at their feet. Take your broken prince, he'd roared. And tell your alpha, the wild mountain pack is under my protection. If you ever set foot on my land again, I will not be so merciful. They had scrambled to retrieve him, their faces a mix of terror and shame. They were gone within the hour. Our victory had come at a cost. We had lost 3 warriors. We mourned them as a pack, with a ceremony that night under the stars. We celebrated our wounded. Lena had a broken arm and a concussion, but she was alive, grumpily ordering me around as I tended to Cade's injuries. You're dabbing at it like you're polishing silver, girl, she'd grumbled from her cot in the infirmary. He's a wolf, not a teacup. Clean the wound. Now, hours later, Cade and I were alone in his cabin. The compound was quiet. I finished stitching the gash on his shoulder. My hands, which had trembled at the wedding, were now steady. You're good at that, he said, his voice a low rumble. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to me. His torso was bare, a landscape of muscle and old scars. And new ones. I learned, I said, tying off the suture. My father, he insisted I learn to stitch wounds. He said it was a useful skill for a Luna to patch up the warriors her alpha broke. Cade went still. His hands clenched into fists. He won't ever touch you again, Tessa, he said, his voice flat and dangerous. Or Julian. Or anyone. I placed my hand on his uninjured shoulder, my fingers tracing the line of a scar. I know. He turned, his golden eyes finding mine. The adrenaline of the battle was gone, leaving something else in its place. Something heavy and hot and as powerful as the moon's mark that pulsed on our hands. He'll be back, I whispered, knowing it was true. Julian won't let this go. And my father, he'll see this as an act of war too. Let them come, Cade said. He covered my hand with his gaze unwavering. This is our home. You are my mate. I looked at our joined hands. Cade, the mark. Lena told me. She said it's not finished. He nodded, his expression serious. The moon's mark is the invitation. The goddess shows us the path. But we have to choose to walk it. What does that mean? It means, he said, his voice dropping, that the bond is not complete. It won't be until you accept me. Accept you? Cade, fully, he clarified. He raised my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to the silver mark. The mating bite, Tessa. It's the final step. It will bind our souls. It will make you my Luna, in body, in magic, in spirit. It will cement you as the alpha female of this pack. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a trace of vulnerability in his golden eyes. But it has to be your choice. I told you I would never force you. After what you've been through, if you are not ready, I will wait. I will wait 1,000 years. I looked at this man. This rogue alpha. He had saved me, protected me, respected me, and fought a war for me. He had shown me more honor and kindness in 4 days than my own family had in my entire life. Julian had offered me a life of cold, political duty. Cade was offering me everything. A home. A pack. A partner. This was my choice. Not a treaty. Not a negotiation. Not an act of survival. My choice. I was a royal, I whispered, my hand moving from his shoulder to cup his bearded cheek. I lived in a grand estate, and I was a prisoner. I was weak. I was terrified. I met his gaze, my heart so full I thought it might burst. Then I came here. To this rogue's cabin. I've never felt stronger. I've never felt safer. I've never felt more like myself. He closed his eyes, leaning into my palm. I'm not ready, Cade, I said. His body tensed. I'm not ready to wait, I clarified. His eyes snapped open, a golden fire blazing in them. I choose this, I said, my voice shaking, but not with fear. With certainty. I choose this pack. I choose this life. And I choose you. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Tessa, he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. I turned my head, baring the skin of my neck, my pulse hammering just beneath the surface. It was the ultimate act of submission. But for the first time, it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like victory. I am yours, Cade, I whispered. I am home. He leaned in, his hot breath brushing my skin. And he murmured, his lips pressing gently against the spot where my neck and shoulder met, am yours. Then he accepted me. A sharp, brief sting, followed by a wave of an energy so profound it stole my breath. It was a white-hot light, exploding behind my eyes, connecting us. I felt him. His strength. His power. His loneliness. His absolute, unconditional, possessive love. It poured into me, and my own small, weak wolf rose up to meet it, our souls locking together. He was mine. I was his. I was no longer Tessa of the Blood Moon Pack, the rejected bride. I was Tessa, Luna of the Wild Mountain. And I was finally, truly, unconditionally loved. We stood on the small balcony of his cabin, hours later, wrapped in a fur blanket. The sun was rising, painting the peaks of the mountains in gold and rose. Our territory. Our home. My father had officially disowned me. Julian was, no doubt, already plotting his revenge. But as I stood there, held securely in my mate's arms, I wasn't afraid. I laid my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The moon had chosen well. Epilogue. 6 months later, the winter had passed, and the mountain was bursting with the vibrant green of spring. The compound was thriving. It was larger now. News of our victory of a pack of rogues defeating the royal heir of Silverwood had spread. We were no longer seen as just an infestation. We were a power. Dozens of wolves, outcasts, unwanteds, and even some warriors from Julian's own pack who were disgusted by his obsessive, failed war, had traveled to our mountain, seeking asylum. Cade welcomed them after a trial period. Our pack had grown. We were stronger than ever. Julian had not returned. His father, the old Alpha Thorn, was furious, not at us, but at his son for his public, humiliating failure. Julian was, for now, in disgrace. My own father had been silent. I was dead to him. But I had heard rumors that he was secretly pleased. His ancient rival, the Silverwood Pack, had been shamed by a rogue and his broken daughter. It was a poetic justice he could appreciate. I stood on the balcony of the lodge, breathing in the fresh, pine-scented air. I was no longer the royal in borrowed clothes. I was a true Luna. My body was strong, my spirit fierce. My small wolf, now bound to Cade's, was a confident, steady presence inside me. I placed a hand on my swollen belly. "You're thinking too loud," a voice rumbled from behind me. I smiled as Cade's strong arms wrapped around me from behind, his hands covering mine on our unborn child. He pressed a kiss to my hair. "I was just thinking," I murmured, leaning back against his solid chest, "that I'm glad Julian was such a monster." Cade chuckled, the sound vibrating through me. "I am too." "He thought he was throwing me away," I whispered, watching a hawk circle in the valley below. He had no idea he was just sending me home. Cade turned me in his arms, his golden eyes soft as he looked at me, then at our child. "He was a fool," he said. He looked at the moon, and all he saw was a rock. He didn't see the light. He leaned down and kissed me, a long, slow kiss that was full of promise, of love, of a future we had built together against all odds. We were still rogues. We were still outsiders. But we were free. And we were, finally, a family. And that's our story. Wow, what a journey for Tessa and Cade. My heart is so full for them. Thank you so much. What was your favorite part? Was it the brutal rejection at the wedding? Or the moment Cade and Tessa met and the moon's mark appeared? How about when Tessa, the weak rabbit, turned out to be the pack's master strategist? Let me know in the comments what part you found the most intriguing. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. My channel is still young and trying to grow, and every single subscription is a huge support from you. It truly means the world to me. I'll see you all in the next interesting story.